Hello and welcome to another podcast with Connor Phillips and George Hamilton. Hello and welcome to ItsThere. George, great to see you again. Welcome back into our podcast space.
Podcast heaven. Only football to be talked about. Well, maybe a bit more besides, but it's just wonderful to be here.
I wanted to ask you a question since we spoke last. I'm keen to find out, how often do you get recognised for just your voice? Right, because we can tell the world a story which you've never shared before about how we met. Because there's a reason I want to talk about the voice and your voice being recognised today, because we're going to do the podcast a little bit different. So how often do you get recognised for your voice?
It happens quite a lot. And, I used to be on television before I developed a face for radio. So I haven't been a regular on TV for quite many years now. So there is a bit of facial recognition still, but it's the voice really that drives it now. And so you'll get situations where, like, I had the dogs out for a walk up the hill near where we live, and this guy's coming towards me with the dog, and I pass the time of day, and I march on, and he marches past me. Then he suddenly stops, and he calls back to me, and he says, "You're..." And only then did the recognition, and it was all about the voice. It wasn't about anything else. And then he said, "Yeah, I thought I recognized you, but I wasn't sure. But as soon as you spoke, it's a big thing."
So, I can share this with our guest, and you all know who the guest is because it's already it's in the podcast description. We'll do a full big sort of trumpet welcome now in a second. But you and I met in the weirdest kind of way. I was going to get my haircut, and I despite having nearly 2 decades of radio behind me, you're probably recognized much more than I am, right? You've much more.
I'm very old.
Of an established voice. And I'm in the hairdressers, and I heard this.
Hairdressers? Turkish barbers.
Turkish barbers, okay? You see, I can't hide anything from you here. And so we're in the Turkish barbers, and I walked in, and occasionally someone will say, "Oh, you're your man from the radio." So I went, "Oh, you said, oh, that's the voice of Connor Phillips," and I went, "How you doing? How you doing? Good to meet you." And then you responded, and then I did that slow look up. I went, "I'm sorry, mate, you're George Hamilton." It's an honor to meet you. And the reason I want to bring all of this up today is because of our guest today, yes. George. I am thrilled that we're doing a little bit differently. Normally what we'll do is we'll get a sports star on, and we'll use your commentary skills at the end of the podcast for them to relive one of the big sporting moments. But I'm kind of in geeky football commentary heaven today.
Yeah, this is a gentleman who goes back almost as far as I go back. And the first time that we met, having described how you and I met, would have been somewhere in the northwest of England, when our guest was working for Radio City in Liverpool. Mm-hmm. Might well have been Anfield, or it might have been Goodison Park. But our trajectories have been very, very similar. Start in radio, and then eventually end up on TV, and then get to the big theaters of football, the big cathedrals. But the voice is so distinctive.
No, but you have to do your distinctive voice. Well, go on, do the full guttural. Our guest today is with the full George Hamilton voice. Go on.
Our guest today, that most distinguished of football commentators, whose name is synonymous with big occasions in general, but with one big occasion in particular, the Champions League final in Camp Nou in 1999, Manchester United's treble. Our privilege and pleasure to welcome Clive Tyldesley.
Paul fans are going to love you for that, George.
Oh, Clive Tyldesley.
Anyone but United.
It's a joy to welcome you to ItsThere with myself and George. This is going to be a bit strange because I kind of want you both to tell me the processes and the collective processes of being commentators, but I want to kind of allow our listeners to live the experiences you had vicariously through both of you. I suppose I want to start with you, Clive. 1970s, you got a half a door opened for you in Nottingham, and that was the beginning of everything.
It's interesting. I was studying industrial economics and politics at the University of Nottingham, mainly because there were only 4 media courses in the entire United Kingdom in further education at the time. I would love to have done a media degree. Now there are 4 at every university, but I wasn't offered a place on any of those. So I kind of did a deal with my dad, who was in small-time business, that as this radio station was opening, as I graduated, and offered me the job of being essentially a T-boy, a runner, whatever they called it at the time. He said, well, give it 6 months. And if it doesn't work out, you'll have your degree, and we'll ask around and see if we can get you an apprenticeship with an accountancy company. And that summer, I got my dad an armband, and we were both walking inside the ropes of the Open Championship. And he turned to me and he said, "I think you should stick with this, son. I think it's going quite well." And so we saw it through. But interesting what you say. Probably one of the very first lessons I was given. I had a late night rock show, would you believe, in my early weeks in local radio, and I was discussing something that was happening in the studio one night, and the program controller heard this, referring to a cleaner that had come in, and he said, "Never do that. Never break the mystery of broadcasting. Never paint a picture of a studio." And now we see everywhere behind the scenes. We see in the tunnel before the players come out into the arena at a football stadium. We see these pictures of us creating essentially some audio content that has to be a visual. But actually, if you go back to that great movie that George will remember, Play Misty for Me, and the love affair that was built up between a listener and a DJ without them ever actually meeting, an obsession really with a voice. Actually, we're taking too much of the mystery out of broadcasting, and I think it was very, very good advice. And even if you're in a really bad commentary position and you've got an obstructed view, or you're nowhere near the halfway line, I always remember that lesson, because the listener or the viewer doesn't want to know. They want your job. You're just lucky to be there. They are that accountant that I nearly became. And so I think trying to keep some of the mystery, the mystique of broadcasting. So we'll do a deal, George. We're not going to explain anything that we know about how to commentate.
Please stay with the podcast till the end. I will dig into their psyche. I'll make sure we get enough of that information.
Just on what Clive was saying, I had exactly the same advice from no less a person than Cliff Morgan when he hired me to join BBC Radio Sport in London after I'd done my local apprenticeship, so to speak. And he had a kind of a checklist of things what a radio commentator should do. Top of the list, score, time, all that sort of thing. Geography. You want to know where they are on the pitch, who's playing left to right, the colours the teams are playing, that sort of thing. He said, but never, ever, ever go where the listener doesn't need to go, like my knees are under my chin because it's too small, or it's pouring with rain, or I'm freezing. They don't want to know that. They've tuned in to hear the match, not what troubles you, and you are the medium. You're like a referee. When the game is over, you don't want to be talked about. It's really you were the medium to bring the match to somebody.
A couple of things I want to talk about, though. I want to talk about relationships. And there's two gentlemen I kind of want to start talking about first of all. One is somebody that Clive kind of accidentally ended up doing a lot of work with in years gone by, and one that both of you have an affiliation for. I'll explain all in a wee second, right? So first of all, I want to talk about Brian Clough, because you started in the 70s in Nottingham. How true is this that Brian Clough once bought you a tie?
He gave me the money to go get a tie. It's a long story, but he was, if you like, my first manager. Nottingham Forest were the first team that I covered for a local radio, home and away. And this was in a wonderful era when there was hardly any division between football and its media. It's probably been the most regrettable development during the 158 years that I've been doing this, the chasm that's grown, the distrust that's grown between football and its media, and the difficulty of having proper trusting relationships with the doers, with the players and with the managers. And at that time, I actually travelled with the Nottingham Forest first team to away games. It was the same was true when I moved on to Radio City, and Liverpool were the finest football team in the world, club football team in the world, but I still travelled with them. I still stayed in the same hotel as the players, and the players were the same age as me at the time, and so they became my great friends. But this first trip that I turned up for, I arrived at Nottingham Station a good half hour before the train was leaving for London. And sure enough, Cloughie got on the train about 15 minutes before departure, came past, and I was looking really, really smart, button-down shirt, have a golf club blazer, but I didn't have a tie on. And he informed me that when I travelled with the official Nottingham Forest party, I was to wear a tie, and I apologised and said it wouldn't happen again. And he repeated it and repeated it. And eventually he got like a pound note out of his pocket, put it in my hand and said, "Train leaves in 10 minutes, young man." And I had to rush into the middle of Nottingham, where thankfully a gents outfitters was just opening, threw the pound note on him, grabbed the nearest tie and got back on the train, and actually wore a tie to every game that I went to until the 1994 World Cup finals, when my first game was in the venue for the final, the Pasadena Rose Bowl. And in old money, it must have been 100 degrees. And I was sitting there in a short sleeve shirt and a tie. And I looked around and everybody else was wearing a tennis shirt or a golf shirt. And I loosened it for the first half and took it off for the second half, but expecting to hear a bellowing voice from heaven, because Cloughy had left us by then.
He got you. He got you, didn't he?
For taking the tie off.
He got you. You know, all those years, Cloughy wasn't with us any longer, and he was still lingering around in the background.
Yeah, I had the tie.
Another man I want to talk about, because you have an entire chapter in your book, your latest book, George. George of several books, can I have, right?
I'm sorry, just the one.
In your latest book, George, you have an entire chapter dedicated to this man. And I know you've had so many dealings with him, Clive, as well, because I've read so many articles in the last couple of days. I'm talking about Sir Alex Ferguson, because both of you, from a commentary perspective, have had those little the sliding doors moments that Sir Alex was part of your lives, and George, for you, it went kind of the right way, and Clive, for you, it started off the wrong way. Would I be right in saying that?
I've had the two biggest rollickings of my life from Sir Alex. Both complete misunderstandings. He was wrong on both counts. I'm still waiting for the apology, by the way, either of them. The apology came with the fact that I wasn't cast into the fiery inferno, that I kind of was allowed back into his stratosphere after a few days after he'd calmed down. But he was very, very good to me. I was very fortunate in so much that I inherited a trusting relationship with my predecessor at ITV, the late, great Brian Moore. Just a gorgeous gentleman. And Fergie trusted him, and a couple of the people that I worked with. I actually knew and worked with one of Sir Alex's sons, who was a match director for a period in his life, Jason. Stayed at the Ferguson house in Wilmslow one night after a game. But yeah, he was very, very trusting with information, with team information. Lunchtime, the day of a huge Champions League game, he would actually tell me things that he hadn't told the players yet, which was kind of a slightly dual responsibility. It was, you're worried that if it leaked out, he might have thought that I was responsible for it. But I was frightened to death of him, but respected him hugely.
What happened with Neville? So this is where eventually
it's such a long
got the
story.
Well, it's a big long podcast. We've plenty of time here, Clive. Come on, what happened with Gary Neville and Phil Neville's dad?
Okay, in the season that Manchester United won the Champions League in Barcelona, they played Barcelona in the group stage. Very tough group stage. Bayern and Barcelona were in that group. And they're all wonderful games. They're all like 5-6 goal games. And on the eve of the match in Catalonia, I had got wind of the fact that Fergie was thinking of playing Wes Brown at right back ahead of Phil Neville. Gary was playing at centre back at the time, but he was worried about the height of Rivaldo, the great Rivaldo, who, quite apart from being a genius with his feet, was a big unit and he was good in the air. So he was thinking of playing the taller Wes Brown at right back. And I went to the press conference, and Gary had conducted himself, as he does to this day, very eloquent and spoke very well. And I just happened to get back to the hotel. And as I walked into the lift, there was the father of Gary and Phil Neville, who, believe it enough, was called Neville. And on the way up to our the floors where our room were, I just said to him, look, Gary conducted himself magnificently. And I just said, by the way, if Phil's not in the starting 11, don't be upset. It would only be because Rivaldo is playing. And I think they're having a thought about playing Wes Brown. It'd be no reflection on Phil. Neville immediately phoned Gary to say, Phil's been dropped. Clive Tyldesley knows the team. I've just seen him. Breakfast next morning, Fergie walks in and Gary confronts him. How does Clive Tyldesley know the team before we do? I go for my lunchtime briefing at the team hotel down by that beautiful harbour at Port Olympic, and I walk right into the hairdryer. I got about 35 seconds in front of a packed hotel foyer and was told where to go because I transgressed the unwritten law. It's like that old Monty Python sketch about the Dinsdale Parada and nailing your head to a coffee table. I got kind of that. So I was out of there. But it wasn't my fault. I'd never actually told Neville that I knew the team. I just read it in the Sunday Times. The great Hugh McIlvanney had written about this, and I knew that he and Fergie were close. And when I tried to explain to Fergie later in the week, I think he clocked that he told Hugh McIlvanney and that he shouldn't have done. But yeah, I got back in.
The trust was rebuilt. George, your experiences with Sir Alex Ferguson, you had a couple of really good ones. You were in the right place at the right time with Sir Alex, right?
Yeah, that year it was at Bayern Munich in the Olympic Stadium in Munich, and we were down on the touchline doing the old piece to camera before the game, the preview piece, and unusually Sir Alex had come out onto the touchline to watch the team warm up. We at that time on RTE had live coverage of the Premiership games on a Saturday afternoon. And we had Manchester United at Southampton the following Saturday, which preceded a Republic of Ireland match against Malta on the following Wednesday. So we would want to speak to the Irish players like Dennis Irwin, Roy Keane, of course, in the Manchester United lineup after the league match at the Saturday. So I took my life in my hands and I thought, well, in for a penny, in for a pound. There he is. And here I am. And I had covered way back when Aberdeen winning the Cup Winners' Cup against Real Madrid in Gothenburg. So I approached Sir Alex on the touchline, on the running track around the Olympic Stadium pitch, and was quite prepared to be told where to put myself. And I said, lovely to see you. Was he Sir Alex at the time?
I don't think he would have been then.
Well,
no.
Lovely to see you anyway.
You called him Sir anyway, did you?
I did. But this brings back memories for me, chance in my arm, of Gothenburg on that rainy night. And his face lit up. And he said, were you there? I said, yeah. I covered that match for Radio 2, as it then was. And of course, that was his first big trophy before any of the Manchester United thing happened. And so he and I hit it off instantly, and I explained why I'd spoken to him, basically because I wanted to see him after the game on Saturday. He said, there's no problem at all. Just hope it goes well tonight. Yes, I wish you well. And off I went. And that was that. And I ended up at the team hotel in Southampton the following Saturday. And after the game, he was as good as his word. And there was some kind of dispute going on at the time with the UK stations. But Alex was prepared to provide my men for me. And he did. He was as good as his word. Only thing was, he told me a little fib. He said Dennis Irwin, who'd been taken off, substituted, would be all right for the Wednesday. Dennis didn't play on the Wednesday, but I did get the interview, and Roy Keane. And Garth Crooks got the interview as well, because he was in the room waiting for the BBC, and the BBC were blanked. But when he was in the room and they were there, he just asked them, and they said they would. And so he got his interviews. ITV sadly didn't, or whoever else was there, but
probably Clive. It was probably Clive.
It was actually Martin Tyler. In fairness, it wasn't Clive that day. But yeah, so I got off to a great start with him, and anytime I had anything to do with him, he remembered me as the guy who'd reminded him that I'd been at Gothenburg with Aberdeen all those years before.
In the second half of the podcast today, we are going to focus on more of the big moments of Clive's career, but I want to talk about the wee questions that us sort of civilians have about the world of commentary, if that's all right. Just a couple of questions. First of all, Clive is on this podcast because Clive and I ended up working together relatively recently, and I'm going to use a quote of your own, Clive, if that's okay. I was like, Clive, it's great to talk to you. I'm slowly but surely becoming more obsessed with the world of commentary. I'm doing a podcast with George Hamilton. are you aware of George's work? And I quote Clive Tyldesley, we have taken wine together. Okay. So I want to know, is it do the English speaking commentators, like after it's all done and dusted, do you all kind of group together, or is there like a fraternity of commentators?
Oh yeah, it's a club. It's like the International Commentators Club, and certainly the one that springs immediately to mind is the hotel that glories in the name of the Euro Building in Madrid, which is just up the street from the Bernabeu. And everybody just makes it up the street, however long it takes them, and they all congregate in the bar in the Euro Building. It's wonderful. It's like an international gathering of commentators. But of course, because of the language thing, we do all hang out together. And yes, I'm reminded of a story actually about how we all hang out together. Again, it's Gothenburg, and it was 1995. When did Ron Atkinson get sacked by Atletico Madrid? It was just after he'd been sacked anyway, and he was with ITV.
24 days after he arrived.
Yes, exactly. Well, anyway, Brian Moore would have been the ITV commentator at the time. So Clive was yet to come to the big Champions League gathering. I am a bit older than Clive, that's why. It's just the way the calendar worked out. Anyway, there we are in Gothenburg, and we do have a co-commentator with us at this stage. RT didn't always, but we did this time, and it was Kevin Moran. So Kevin was there. Ron had been obviously his manager at Manchester United, and we were all together answering your question. You know, the English language commentators all together, RTE, ITV. And we're chatting away, and Ron is there, but nobody mentions the elephant in the room, which is that he lasted 4 days at Atletico Madrid.
Despite winning, like he won like 6 out of 9 games or something, but it just didn't all work out for him.
Yeah. Anyway, Kevin Moran, as his former player, was the one who finally broached the subject and said to Ron, because everybody's dying to know, we've all had a glass of wine by now. Kevin said, come on, Ron, tell us, where are you going after this now? What do you want after this? He said, tell you what, another Atletico Madrid. Because he obviously got such a payoff.
Nice little bonus, a nice little payoff. But Clive, do you know each other? Because you will never really listen to each other's commentary, because we didn't. I was lucky because where I'm from, I got both, right? But in England, when I've lived in England, you don't get RTE's commentaries, and RTE doesn't really get the British commentaries. You don't really hear each other's work. How does that work, Clive? Or do you seek it out?
Really, no. To be honest, my friendship with George has been cultivated by everything other than football. In a way, I hope I've got a life outside of this job. It's the job I always wanted to do. I love it. I'm quite obsessive about it when I'm doing it. But when we get to that bar, I probably don't want to talk about the game. I certainly don't want to talk about commentary. I'd much rather talk about fine wine and a bit of golf, our families, and George is a bit of a rarity in our business, because quite a lot of the guys are fairly hung up on what they do. They'd commentate on 3 games a day if somebody gave them the opportunity. And I'd like to think that George and I are a couple of people who can take a step back for it, be very, very grateful for what the opportunities that we've been given. Have an awful lot of love and respect for everybody that we work with, but actually, let's talk about something. Let's put the ball away. Hey, Leo, let's talk about something else.
Well, hold on.
And I always felt I've got on with George in those post-match bars, because we weren't the two who were arguing about that offside decision.
Yes. Yeah. I'm going to completely contradict everything you said there now, using a quote of yours here, Clive. Lovely, nice people, homely people who want to just, talk about other things. Clive, you have said in the past, commentators are confident, bordering on arrogant. So I want to know, while I have 2 of them here today, True, George, I'll let you start on that one there. True?
You have to believe in yourself to be a commentator. I think that's the bottom line, that you wouldn't be doing it if you didn't believe in yourself, and you put yourself out there to sell yourself, to get the gig in the first place. And then when you do it, every show is a performance, and it's got to be good to make sure that you get to do the next one. So there has to be a degree of self-confidence, maybe not arrogance, but certainly you can't do it without being confident.
Okay, well, Clive, you're the one who said it. Does the arrogance live a little bit more with you?
As with most things I'm quoted as saying, I don't remember saying it. Are you sure? But anyway, whatever. I think I'm probably the worst judge of commentators. When I listen to other commentators, And I have listened a lot to George because of the circumstances. I suppose I'm self-critical. I hope I'm my own biggest critic. I'm very rarely satisfied with a piece of work when I listen to it back. And I do listen to it back because I think that's the only way you can learn. The good thing for you, Connor, as a viewer, as a lover of football, is that we're all a bit different. We all come at it from a slightly different direction. It would be a very, very boring football world if every commentator sounds the same. I'm sure in 10 years' time, AI will have taken over and there will be no commentators and they will all sound the same. But hopefully George and I have brought a little bit of our personality to the games that we've covered. And that probably, when I'm asked for advice, as I often am by young wannabe commentators, I always say, bring yourself to the party. By all means, listen to other commentators and decide what it is you like about the ones that you like, and vice versa. But don't try to copy anybody. You need to bring your own personality. And I think the finest commentators we've ever heard, certainly in the UK, I mean, you probably start with Brian Moore and John Motson and Barry Davies. I knew them all personally, totally different kind of men and totally different kinds of approach to commentary. That's it, which is great.
This is awkward then. Don't try to be anyone else, because the stream running through the ItsThere podcast is, what happens is we get George to recreate a sporting moment of commentary, normally when we have a sporting great here. And that's absolutely what you are, Clive Tyldesley. But George, you don't know this. What I have done tonight, I have sent, before we go into the break here, I have sent Clive the big one. I have sent Clive the World Cup 1990 Packy Bonner save, A Nation Holds Its Breath. Would you be okay with Clive recreating this? And I tell you what, then at the very end of the podcast, I give you the opportunity to get your own back, and I will provide you with the words of Clive in 1999 in Camp Nou in Barcelona. So, Clive, could you do this going into the break? This is what George is known for, and it still makes my heart skip a beat.
It will be my pleasure, George. And it's now Romania's second substitute, Daniel Timofte. Dinamo Bucharest, actually, George. Dinamo Bucharest midfield player to step forward. The sequence now is that if he should miss and Ireland's last penalty taker could score, that the match and the progress are Ireland's. Nothing like Irish logic. Love it. Timofte against Bonner. Yep. What's that? Yep. Is that? Yep.
He's commentating on the commentary. Would you get on with it, you?
Big man from Donegal, steadied up for a victory. But who's stepping up to assume the task? David O'Leary of Arsenal. In his 52nd international appearance, David O'Leary is entrusted with the responsibility of taking the penalty that can send Ireland into the quarterfinals of the World Cup. This kick can decide it all. All together now. The nation holds its breath. Yes, we're there. I'm English. I'm from Bury. Ireland are through to the quarterfinals of the World Cup, in a meeting with Italy or Uruguay in Rome on Saturday night.
Oh, absolutely. How does that feel?
Just a shame there was nobody sober to listen to you,
Not
George.
a single one of us. Hold on, right. Stay with us. We will be back very shortly because George will get a chance to get his own back. And on top of that, we'll find out about some of the big moments of Clive's career. And we'll find out whether it's true or not. And I quote, you don't know this, George. Clive sent me a text today and he says, we'll maybe have a chat about the phrase, commentary is better than sex. Find out after this on ItsThere with George Hamilton, Connor Phillips, and our special guest, Clive Tyldesley.
Yes.
We are joined by Clive Tyldesley, and we're still there's a veritable sort of hum of joy around the studio here. George, that was pretty good, wasn't it?
That was magnificent, and the comments in the middle of it all as well.
He's commentating on his own commentary, like only Clive. Here, tell me about this phrase: commentary being better.
Just say, George, you need to know this. When Connor sent me the script, there was a typo, and instead of entrusted David O'Leary, it was untrusted David O'Leary, which actually, as most typos, was closer to the truth than the truth, because Jack couldn't believe it when David walked forward to take the crucial penalty, which does beg the question what Jack knew about any of what was going on. He just started smoking again after 2 years. If you remember, he managed to catch a tab of somebody who was watching and had lit up to watch the penalty shootout. And he kind of put his hand to his head when David walked forward to take what turned out to be the fateful penalty.
Nobody was more surprised than the rest of us. Absolutely. Talk to me about this phrase, Clive. Commentary's better than sex. Football's better than sex. Go on, give me the background to this, because there's a twinkle in your eye, and I'm so glad that you're on the show. We're having way too much fun with this today.
Well, as always, you've got the quote completely wrong, Connor, but that's fine. You're in media. That's quite all right. I'm referring to a podcast that I did many, many moons ago, where people were asked to nominate their favorite piece of commentary. And somebody who was on the podcast with me chose a piece of radio commentary by Jonathan Pearce, who's still very much around, from his Capital Gold days, when he had a wonderful reputation for being very voluble. And it was England scoring at Euro 96 in a home tournament. And he finished the piece of commentary with Super Al, Super Al, Super Alan Shearer. Absolutely fantastic commercial gold, suiting the moment and the platform. But my argument with the guest was, would you like all your commentary to be like that? And the analogy I draw is that if you were to ask somebody privately, not on a podcast for everybody to listen to, what is the best sex you've ever had? The answer would probably involve the office print room, or some bushes, or the backseat of a car with somebody you probably shouldn't have been with. And my question is, do you want all your sex to be like that? Or would you really prefer to have most of your love life in the company of somebody that you dearly love and trust, somebody who knows you, somebody whom you can draw the curtains on the world with, in a palatial bed with a fluffy pillow, and fall asleep next to afterwards and snore openly? And I think that the answer to the question is, whilst that one moment, JP moment, that Jonathan Pearce moment, is memorable, actually most commentary, you want to be with somebody who you don't know, but you feel as if you trust, somebody who, when the presenter says, and the commentator today is George Hamilton, you think, oh, good, fine, we're in safe hands. You don't want to wake up next to somebody frothing at the mouth every morning. You want to wake up next to somebody who you have a relationship with, and you want to share this wonderful thing with again. And that's why I think most commentary is actually very warm and familiar, and has a relationship that's been built up over a period of time. And that is the analogy that I'm making between lovemaking and football listening.
Well, is this now, are we one of those podcasts now, after we've done that, with it has to have the little E on it now for explicit content when we upload this to the podcast server? I don't know. Who knows?
That was wonderful. A wonderful explanation.
George, you look far too satisfied with that over there. I'm waiting on you to light a cigarette.
I know that was absolutely brilliant. I wasn't aware of that Jonathan Pearce line, but that was just So good, so good. He's been brilliant down the years too. Really has. Really
Yeah,
has.
and is that again going back to that moment where you can say that now, Clive, because you all kind of get on well together. It's just like as a presenter, don't get me wrong, there is competition and we're a competitive race.
Yeah.
Is it the same with commentators? Very similar. You once you crack through that bit, you're going, well, you're not trying to take my job. I can be your friend now.
Well,
As I say, I don't go out of my way to socialise with commentators. Not just because there is a competitive air. I mean, let me say this, and I hope I'm not going to make a headline. Peter Drury has a different style of commentary to me. I really, really like Peter. Is a much nicer person than me to begin with. So yeah, he is a friend.
No sex anecdotes and podcasts from Peter Drury, I tell you.
No, exactly. But what Peter tries to do, and I had a wonderful mentor, the late Reg Guttridge, who was a boxing commentator. And one of the things that he gave to me was that every goal is unique. And if you're fortunate enough to be an audio part of a great goal, it deserves more than incredible and unbelievable, amazing. It needs some words that are specific to the goal, because those words will become a part of that goal forever and a day. And that is essentially the challenge of what we do. And Peter Drury is not an amazing, incredible, brilliant guy. He is always trying to find words that are unique to the moment. They are different words from the ones that I would use, and he is quite poetic in his style, and that's cool. And it's probably a little bit more that moment you remember, rather than the 50-year marriage with somebody. I just feel as if, since he's now become a regular part of our consumption of football as Sky's lead commentator, that the excitement that accompanied his appointment has probably been replaced with a bit of, oh, wow, this is it too much every week. And that is just my opinion. And that sounds like a really catty criticism of Peter. Listen, he's working for Sky, I'm not. And he is a really, really popular commentator. But I do think you have to be a little bit careful when you become the voice of the Irish national team. You become the voice of RTE when you are there every week. And you've got to establish a longer term relationship with the audience than when you're maybe coming in just trying to make an impact, trying to get the ear and the eye of a head of sport or a producer. And that's why I think that analogy, which is a bit wild, is actually quite accurate. Because if you think of Brian Moore, you think of warmth. You think of somebody that you never met, who you would have liked. And I can only tell you would have liked him. And George will tell you the same.
Absolutely, yeah.
And George, that's a fine balance, though, but between impressing and overdoing it, specifically early in your careers, I imagine, because you want to be the voice, you want to be the trusted voice, you want to be the person, like Clive said earlier on, the person you want to go home with and close the door and close the curtains and give a cuddle to on the couch. But you also want to stand out. And is that getting harder and harder for people now?
It possibly is, because there are so many more commentators around now than there were when Clive and I were going through the 90s and the noughties. That so many matches are being covered, so many commentators are required. And to me, there is on the other side of the coin that Clive was talking about, an awful lot of them sound the same, because they're following a template that they think is the way to go, whereas we had the luxury of finding our own voices, and nobody was saying don't say that or do it like this. We were trusted, and we got the opportunity to develop a style in the way that Brian Moore developed his style, or the late Peter Jones on the radio developed his style. Barry, John Motson were all different kind of people. They brought their personality to the occasion, and had the opportunity there was the breadth of space to allow them to do that. Whereas everything is so congested now. Clive made the point about...
There was one screen in the house, Connor. There was one screen in the house. And 3 generations watched those football matches together. And so the commentator, the presenter, the pundits, I mean, if you look at television viewing figures now, even in the last few years, the breadth of choice that there is, both in terms of the number of channels, but also in the ways that you can consume particular piece of content. I mean, I don't know why or how. I don't want to know why. Quite a lot of people in the UK are able to listen to our commentaries on Champions League games for CBS. They shouldn't be. It's illegal, but they do. I get a lot of feedback from within the UK. So it is just such a congested space now that you can't form that relationship with individuals in the way that you did. And I'll tell you, I've had times in recent years where I've been sat at home with a glass of wine on the sofa watching a game, and my wife said, "You're getting terrible stick here on Twitter." To what? Yeah. It's not me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm not there. There's so many commentators that the critics don't even know who they're having a go at anymore.
Both of you were the voice of a national broadcaster, and both of you have now had to pivot. So, George, you obviously decades in RTE. Now you're with Premier Sports. Clive, you were decades with ITV. Now you're with the various, like you said, American broadcasters. How does this make you both feel? George, you and I have talked about this at length. Clive, we mentioned this when we've had conversations. Is it difficult when you move away from something that you were so sort of entrenched with and it was part of your everything, and you have to find a different way of doing things as you get later in life, as you get more mature in years? Clive, it's a bit of a serious question, but I know it's something you're passionate about.
Yeah, I think you've got to find balance in life, full stop. And I'm 70 years of age. It seems that every time the mailman delivers some post, I've got to go for a checkup or something. Yeah, okay, fine. Early diagnosis is everything when you get to our age. Well, that's cool, and I've got to accept that. But it's easier to accept when you've been such a lucky boy. And this is the only job I ever wanted to do. And yeah, we both commentated on World Cup finals and Euro finals and Champions League finals. And we've been part of people's memories of, and football moments are huge moments in people's life, far, far too big, really. But thankfully for George and I, people are more interested in football than they are in politics or religion or just about anything. So they invest a huge amount of themselves in those moments and in their teams. And if we're lucky enough to be, a part of the soundtrack, we're part of the soundtrack of their lives. So I have got nothing whatsoever to moan about. Does that stop me moaning? Really? No. No. And so, yeah, I mean, I was really, really surprised when ITV decided to replace me with a younger man in the summer of 2020. I'm glad you've mentioned it, Connor, because I just about got over it. But yeah, now
you're welcome. That's the joys of this explicit podcast.
But yeah, but you've got it. And does it nag at in the back of my head? And does it come out from time to time? Yes. But hopefully it comes out now with the balance that not only have I been lucky professionally, I'm very, very lucky in life. I've never been happier than I am. My wife and I are best friends and best everything. We've got 4 big things that we loosely call children. We've now got a grandchild. We've got another one on the way. I mean, I could not ask for more.
Congratulations.
But that won't stop me asking for more.
Yeah. and George, I think from having spoken to you at length about it, you have very, very similar views in the world.
I do. We have been exceedingly lucky. Like in my case, it was 40 years with RTE Sport before that ended. And everything does come to an end. And of course, when it happens, it's not very pleasant. But you grab the opportunities that are there. You use the word pivot. I think it's a very good word, that when you realize that sands are shifting, winds are changing, it's up to you to take control of your situation. Nobody owes you anything. Clive has done that. I have done that. And I consider myself exceedingly fortunate, not only in the sporting career that I have, that I'm still able to carry on with Premier Sports, but in the fact that my audience almost grew up with me and turned into a radio audience. And now they're there on Lyric FM.
Podcast audience
And
as well.
there's a podcast audience as well, which I never ever dreamt of. But you know, the 40 years with RTE Sport created that in a way. And so, and what's the song say? They can't take that away from me.
Yeah. Well, I suspected we talk much more about and Solskjaer has won it in 1999, but I am so glad that not as a Liverpool fan, but I'm so glad we haven't, because the other stuff we've talked about is stuff I didn't know. It's much more enjoyable. It's getting into the little idiosyncrasies of your worlds, and that's great. Thank you so much for that. But we will finish with that. George, we've already lived your moment, the big moment. I
hope I can do as much justice to Clive's words Camp Nou as he did to mine in that wonderful moment in Genoa back then.
Clive commentated.
What's the Nou Camp, George? I mean, when did they start calling it? I mean, I'm sure they do call it in Catalonia Camp Nou, but it's the Nou Camp.
Build this up for us first, George.
FC.
build this up for us, George. Right, 1999. It's your first Champions League final, I believe. You had taken over from the great Brian Moore.
I did the year before because Brian was retiring after the World Cup final and wanted a kind of a weekend off before we went to France. So I actually did the year before. But in terms of the size of the audience, it was certainly the first 20 million audience that I ever worked with. And essentially, if I messed up that night, we wouldn't be having this conversation now.
But isn't it right to say you messed up absolutely horrifically halfway through that game?
I did,
The first goal, am I right in saying
the first goal completely wrong? Yeah, I blame Schmeichel to this day. I see a lot of him because he works with us on CBS. He was probably the best individual player in that team because he was the greatest goalkeeper in the world at the time. And so when Basler hit the free kick early in the game and Peter didn't move, I said deflected and in. And because it wasn't deflated, Peter just never moved. And it was a fairly ordinary final, if the truth's told, until the last dramatic sort of 10 minutes, really, because Bayern hit the woodwork twice at 1-0 before the two substitutes scored the goals. It was huge because, particularly for English people watching, we had suffered at the hands of the Germans so many times, and there was an invincibility about that kind of Bavarian look and strut. I can still see that a guy who took the final penalty after Gareth had missed, what was he called? Andy, him strutting away. And we just didn't think we could beat them. And so in a sense, that moment that I had when I got back to the hotel after the game and wondered whether I'd overcooked it, wondered whether every Liverpool, Leeds, Manchester City, West Ham fan was making an effort of me to burn that night because I'd gone OTT. I think the fact that we'd waited so long for a European Cup win, and the fact that Manchester United had done it very much in their way, and the fact that they'd beaten, and this isn't obviously meant to be xenophobic, but we'd beaten the Germans, the German football machine, rather than anything else in German history, made it palatable. And I think that for half an hour, even the most anti-Manchester United fan probably skulked off and thought, go on then, enjoy it. You've earned it. It's your night.
Was it a risk Solskjaer has won it? Because that's one of those, like they cut it because of the nature.
Yeah, and Devon Lock has won it. Yeah, it was. And of course, if Bayern had gone down the other end and equalised and it had gone to penalties, and they definitely would have won the penalty shootout because they always won those, then that effigy would have been hanging from the Arndale Centre in Manchester, and it would have been me. Yeah, I think it would have been my fault.
Clive, before you go, tell me about commentary charts, because this is absolutely joyous. I love this. It's one of the things that I have seen. I need one of these in my life. Tell us about this other little pivot you have.
Well, allow me to show you the back of my body for one moment as I walk and pick up one of these. So these are the kind of notes that George and I and every commentator prepare for every game. They are our crib sheet. They are our cheat our cheat code, if you like. They are, as much as anything, a prop to make sure that we feel assured when the red light comes on. We will probably use only 10% of the information on here. Otherwise, we're boring our public to pieces. But they are, in their strange way, quite a nice memento of a famous game. This is the wonderful Newcastle victory over Fergie's Manchester United all those years after Kevin Keegan had been told I would love it and all that sort of stuff. And back in the first lockdown, a good friend of mine, Chris Stark, suggested we should market these. And now we've got more than 60 teams and nearly 100 charts. And so, yeah, if you've got a big game and you want a memento, then have a look at commentarycharts.com and you may well find one of these.
And I will say this, you're not paying us to do this. That genuinely, as somebody who has a household, and George has seen my house full of mementos, the value for money, like for what you charge, for what you get, there are very few people doing that kind of value for money. So can I say, as a memento fan,
£153,000 each.
Yes. and then Clive was completely retiring from comedy altogether. Well, look, Clive, I cannot say thank you enough. This has been... I knew it was going to be fun, George, but I wasn't just sure how much fun I was going to have in this little slice of podcast world.
I think it's fair to say Clive is a great man to have a glass of wine with, and he might be having one now.
I think he did. Yeah, it's empty. Well,
we are on the water.
We're on the water here. So
the wine.
It's 6 o'clock somewhere in the world.
Yes.
Here. So you have done it for George. You did his commentary, but then ultimately commentated on the commentary. But listen, we expect nothing less from you. You are one of the world's greatest. So what I've done is we've got the script of the "And Solskjaer has won it" moment, and George Hamilton on the ItsThere podcast is going to relive that moment. And you know what? At the end of it, I will allow you to critique George as well, doing your commentary. So, George, take it away.
Manchester United are level. As things stand, we'll go into extra time with a golden goal hanging like a massive shadow over this final, unless Ole Solskjaer can conjure up another. You have to feel this is their year. Is this their moment? Beckham into Sheringham, and Solskjaer has won it! Manchester United have reached the promised land. Ole Solskjaer, the two substitutes have scored the 2 goals in stoppage time, and the treble looms large.
Yeah, I'll tell you something about that goal. And obviously,
He's got something to say.
There's a huge amount of fortune in all football, but if you could have had one person in the world to take a set piece for you at that moment, it would have been David Beckham. If you'd have had one person in football to flick it on at the near post, you would have probably chosen Teddy Sheringham. And if you could have chosen one person to come off the bench and angle his foot and direct it up into the only part of the goal that he could possibly score, it might well have been Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Luck? Bollocks.
Clive Tyldesley, thank you for joining us on ItsThere. That was truly memorable.